afternoon, and thank you all for being here for this session, which is the fourth in our strand composed around insurgent cosmopolitanism. Those of you who were here yesterday would know that there was a certain discussion that was contoured in the opening sessions, much of it having to do with the nature of how, in fact, we expand our conceptions of citizenship, of social belonging, of political participation. And we were working or trying to work around the relationships among various notions such as citizenship, insurgency, and cosmopolitanism, and trying to bring all of these into, or trying to bring into play various accounts of these relationships. So what we want to try and do in this session is to bring these questions directly into the domain of artistic practice and cultural practice. And we're going to hear from Berlin-based artists, actually. We will traverse with them to many elsewheres, but they're both based here, Juan Maidagan and Dolores Zinny, and Nina Fische and Maroan el Sani. And it's been my privilege as curator and writer on art to have worked with both of them, well, all four of them, both formations, and to have had a series of conversations with them over the years. So what we want to try and look at by attending to their practices is this question of how to be a guest, the active guest. What does that mean? Because discussions of cosmopolitanism typically have revolved around the notion of how to be the host. What does hospitality involve? Derrida famously has spoken of the ethic of hospitality and elaborated on that. But we want to try and see what it means to be on the other side of that relationship. How does one, in fact, intervene as, if you will, an insurgent cosmopolitan, as an artist embracing the predicament of the other, attending to the crisis of the other, and then producing a set of propositions, developing an account, a critique even, of complex cultural and political situations far removed from one's own location. So how does one translocate in these ethical, political, and philosophical terms? So those are some of the questions that will open up before us. So the format is that I'm going to ask Dolores and Juan to go first, present their evolving understanding of these questions through the work they've done, and then we turn to Nina and to Maroan. So, Dolores, could I ask you to?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Ranjit. And yeah, we make a selection of some works that in a way could begleiten, could make a dialogue with what we spoke with Ranjit some years ago. So I would like to start projecting some images. Could they appear? Yeah, okay. So much light, I hope you see something. Yeah. This is, I will start with the work we did this last January in UCI, it's the University of California at Irvine. Irvine is between San Diego and Los Angeles. So we received the invitation like 1.5 years ago, and we start looking and searching for images, and the images that you are seeing are some images that from the university they send us. And starting to be curious about the site, because we have never heard of Irvine before, we got to know that Irvine was a ranch, and it was then donated to make the university and the city of Irvine around the university. The plan was in '57, and the finalization of the project was beginning of the '60s. And the main architect and urbanist that did this project is William Pereira. And we start looking at his architecture. As you see, like the one that is up is a library that he designed. He designed all the buildings, right? But we start being interested in this not relation or relationship, I never know which word to use, between the landscape and the context that was there before and what he constructed and what he designed. So we start focusing on this building, not knowing why, but looking at it, xeroscoping it, and very much also focusing on his first sketches, that of course at that time they were not computer-based. It was not this Illustrator and this program, so it was this intention and effort on repeating this cast concrete module that makes the facade. He was one of the ones that began using cast concrete at that time. So on one side we were, I don't know, researching, but looking with interest at Williams Pereira's work. And on the other hand, Juan particularly, he was reading this book that is called El Río Sin Orillas, de Juan José Saer. Juan José Saer is a writer. His parents were from Lebanon, but he was born in Argentina, and then he returned to live in Paris. And El Río Sin Orillas, the translation will be the river without shores. And there he narrates in fictional style, he's an amazing writer actually, the conquest of South American by the Spaniards, but also the abstract quality of the geography of the pampas, of the extension, and in a way this anxiety that the Spaniards felt with this vast land of occupied by savages and not occupied. And in a way we thought it was a link between Pereira constructing this building in the middle of nowhere and that of the conquest. At the same time, Saer is going with the system of naming, how the Spaniards were naming the geographical accidents. And it's interesting because when, I don't remember whom, but when he arrives to the very, very south, he ends up naming a Cape Name, and that's the name of our show. So Saer is explained like it's the more generic gesture because they start putting names, but when they become south, they start getting tired and they become conical hill, pyramid, no, with all these abstract names till they arrive to Cape Name. So this is the gallery space. It's a space that opened like 1 year ago. So I think that we are the third or the second show there. So the show started with a drawing of but actually this is so much stretch that is in the reality, but it doesn't matter. With the show with a drawing of the line of the mountain that the library is blocking. The view that the library is blocking. And then this drawing that is based on the drawings that Pereira did, the studies that he did, with the line of the mountain crossing it. I don't know if you see something, yes, but not that much. But it was done all by hand, and it was interesting in a way, this idea of thinking of the repetition and how it was not achieved exactly at that time in the drawings, right? It was interesting for us also, not only this repetition that is almost a military order, and actually now, today, around the campus, there are military bases, but also this shape that was like morphological, like feminine, uterine. So with also these drawings, we wanted to shape to that contrast of feminist shapes, organic, and this idea of increase by repetition of the cast concrete. And so on one side were these drawings, and on the other side were studies of horizons. They could also be architectural studies of landscape. Done in fabric. Actually, they are square, no? Now they appear like long shape, but they are more square than. They are like 1.50 m by 1.50 m. Almost, because they were all cut by hand and with paper, so. It can also remind us of banners, but I think that immediately one not see them as banners anymore, but at this confrontation of one point in the horizon. That's what we wanted to do, no? I don't know if you can read this, but this is because Saer book is not translated into English, but only this part and a little bit more is so. I thought that maybe I put it so you can read if you want. But he's quoting some Arab poets and how they name infinite aspects of the same thing, and I think that in that way it can be related to the fabric paintings, and on the other hand, this idea of occupying in the abstract geography by an architectural act, no? Yeah? You want to say something, or we? So, yeah, no, but this is a show that we did in the museum here in Frankfurt, but it's this is the facade of the building, but because it's 19 is the comb, like the comb that you use to comb your hair, and 27 is the fish. So a title could be how to comb your hair, how to comb your fish, no? Which is impossible, so I will not speak. The fish. I will not speak about this show later, because if not, we will go. But I will go very much on time. And this is a show that we did in Bilbao many years ago. Yeah, and Juan was going around and went for a walk, and then he got to this part of the city that was going to be reconstructed by Zaha Hadid, and everything was going to be turned down. I don't know if that really happened. Because Bilbao basically lived historically from steel industry, and this was the logo on a fabric that the factory, sorry, fabric is in Spanish, that the same owner of the factory designed it in the 50s, actually. So we start the show with this photograph, the show in Sala Recalde, with the photograph of the logo that everybody there knows and knows exactly where it's coming from, right? And then we designed a border. That's why I thought it was interesting, because we were talking about geography and mountains, and then the show is called The Coast, The Attacked, and the Same. And working with maybe the stereotypes and superficial reading that one can have of Bilbao, this idea of constructing a border, and at the same time the border as a result of fear of being attacked, and not to differentiate yourself. So we designed this sculpture, which was very difficult to recognize the shape once you are there. And then these drawings that were based also on the model, that for us has to do with this idea of attack, of the same, of creating the identity and icons of identity. this was a studio of the shape in space. I think it was like 25 meters long by, I don't know how tall, 160 maybe? No. No, because, I mean, I was seeing it, so. Yeah. And of course, also you have there the Guggenheim and Richard Serra and all these references that you can pinpoint from outside. Do I have time to talk of one more project? Yes. Wow, so long ago also. This is this show is called Semantic Gap, and it was a show we did in Lund, Kunsthalle, in Sweden, near Malmo. And again, I don't know why, I don't think it's always this, but it was again Juan that went for a walk because they invited us, and I was with Dorotea, that was a baby, my daughter, so he went, and going around, he came with these photographs, and he said, I found this amazing place. This is a fountain that was done also, I think, in the 60s, beginning of the 60s. The architect was Claes Anselm, and it was a collaboration with the Institute of Technology of the University of Lund. And this fountain only worked for one day, because these platforms that you see were having a glass surfaces. Couple of days, you think? Okay, 1 or 2 days, but a failure in a way. And then what happened, it was very expensive to turn it down, so it stays there as a ruin. And in a way, it's successful as a public sculpture now, because it's talking about the... Which sculpture? The shape that it was, yeah, the shape that...
There are platforms, and there was water leaking from one to the other, so it was a sort of a floating river, or so, sort of, no? There were 2 ponds, one up, one on the top, one in the bottom. And because the water, the strength of the water is so much that it breaks the glass, and it lasts nothing.
And and it stays like minutes walking from the Kunsthalle. So the show, again, was called Semantic Gap, and in the entrance of the space, we put in the door the word, as you see, fountain, fontan, fontana in Spanish. And
actually, the architect who designed the fountain also designed the Kunsthalle, and it's the first Kunsthalle that was designed, that was built up in Sweden, 1957. It's also the architect who designed the Kunsthalle in Malmo.
It was this sculpture also, like you see before. The inside is fabric and the outside is wood. And it was like a mammoth, like huge modernist structure that in a way was articulating when the viewer was going around and seeing the sculpture. In a way, we thought they were paying attention to the amazing architecture of the place. Yeah, please.
Actually, the sculpture has a sort of a function in strict reference to the space itself. The space has 2 levels, as you can see. It is this architect also designed quite many factories. He also was as soon as you step in the Kunsthalle, you can feel this sort of I don't know, probably basilica, idea of a basilica too, no? The high ceiling, very short, very little entrances, though, and somehow this, which it is not anything else, just a pledge, bit of paper, like a plain pledge, intervened, though, in which after you realize that the piece it comes together somehow once you realize that you have to walk two levels, right? So somehow, immediately the piece becomes the space which surrounds it. Was
Yeah.
it clear?
So, I mean, the images are horrible in a way, how they project, but it doesn't matter. So, and also with this sculpture, there were these graphics that is called, they were called identical and duplications, or people aim for the same place at the same, no, things, more often people aim for the same place at the same time. And the graphics were related to this idea of the fountain and of the sculpture. Then they become murals in the same exhibition space. And of course, it includes all the photographs and archive photograph, a little bit retouched of the fountain. And we always include the titles of the works as artwork itself. So these titles were put in different orders all around the circulation. Yes, and with this I think we finish. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that account, Dolores and Juan. Nina, Maroan, are you? I think we'll course through your work, and then I will address questions to both of you.
No, you don't need to switch it on.
1, 1.
That's what I assume.
Yes, yes. Okay.
I think it should.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, welcome to the lecture. We're happy that you're all here. Maybe at the beginning we should quickly introduce ourselves. So we are Maroan and me, Nina. We are working together since the beginning of the 90s in Berlin. And this was a time when Berlin was changing a lot, and it was a time of transition in Berlin. And we were especially interested in that time about in the architecture, and especially in the fact how the city wears his history in this time of transition and changing, because lots of buildings were crashed down, not everything was kept. And it's always a question of the city, so the relation of the city, its memory, and what it wants to keep, and how it wants to define its identity in the future. So this is a little bit the background also of the questions or the subjects of works that we did later. And we want to show 4 different works very quickly, like short excerpts. And one is a work we realized in Italy, 2011, and the other ones will be 3 works that we realized in Japan, where we lived from 2007 to 2010. Okay. Yeah, the first work is called Imperiled Eseni, so the Empire of the Signs. And it's a work that we did 2011 in Rome, at a location which is the Palazzo dei Congressi in the quarter of the city, or part of the city, which is called EUR. It's Esposizione Universale di Roma. It's a district or part of the city which was built from, or planned from Mussolini in the 40s. And it's between Ostia at the beach and the city of Rome. Yeah, this piece is about the identity in the city, and in that time, 2011, all around there were these uprisings. There was the Arab Spring, and also in several countries, and also in Italy, there was an uprising against Berlusconi in that time. And we did an intervention with a group of citizens of Rome in this building, the Palazzo dei Congressi. Because this area, the EUR, in that time, Berlusconi and the government, they wanted to kind of brush it up and revalidate this old neo-imperialistic architecture in Rome. And so this was for us very interesting. So why does this happen? I mean, they have a lot of historic buildings in Rome. They also have this EUR. And there's always the question, so what to do with these historic buildings? Because in the fascist time, it was not finished, and later it was used for administrative uses. In the 90s, it was used for some raves, and then in the 2000s, they started to use it for some fairs. And now the last government wanted to do something different with it and use it more like for party meetings and so on. Yes, from the Berlusconi. I mean, it's already 2 years ago. And yeah, okay, just a second. A little bit to the building. It has been built in 42, and the architect is Libera. It's Architektur Rational. And it was a model city, this EUR was a model city by Mussolini for the new imperialistic Rome. And he referred to classical Roman city planning. Then during the war, they stopped building this or finishing this building. And then after 45, it was, as I said before, it was used for a different purpose. Yeah, with our intervention, we staged a communicative action in collaboration with a group of citizens of Rome through the language of signs, body language and gestures. The people temporarily took over this space, redefining the identity of the city they live in. And we wanted to focus on the contrast between the non-verbal communication of people and the silent language of this architecture. And I'm going to show the series of photographs that we did. Yeah, this is the interior of the Palazzo dei Congressi, and you can see the yellow facade, and behind there are still the original murals, but they were covered after the war. And we used this place as a stage for the intervention. And the second place we used was the terrace of this building. And there's a balcony, a kind of strange balcony, and it was actually, there was meant to be a quadriga, but it was never finished, and so it looks like this now. Now this is the first image of the intervention. A girl steps into the room and makes a time out. And to say how we started, we did a workshop with a group of citizens and asked them about this area, EUR, if they ever go there, if they would ever use it. And it turned out that almost nobody went there, and it was kind of ignored, a kind of ignored neighborhood. Nobody wanted to go there. And we raised up the question, so how can we reclaim this part of the city, or how could we reuse it? And out of this discussion, they developed a series of sign languages, so for how to kind of redefine these places or reuse. And there's a series of 6 photographs. First is the time out. As was once we did the whole thing inside and once outside. And I will explain about it later. And the second is the one about individual signs. So everybody has his own opinion or his own vision about the future of this place. And then to come together, there would be a kind of sit-in, and also to fight for their own ideas. They would do a human chain. Then they would come together and raise their fist for a kind of veto. But in the end, they would they would define a kind of manifest, and they are using a sign language. It's an Italian sign language, and it's almost like a daguerreography. So if you would watch from left to right, you could see the movement. Can you do the movement? Because this is just in single images.
Looks like this. So it means manifesto.
It means manifesto on the street, and there's a different version of manifesto, like manifesto in the arts. And so we did this intervention like 2 times, one time inside the Palazzo dei Congressi and once outside. Okay. Yeah, it was just like a short introduction, and I will go on to talk about another work, which is called Spelling Dystopia. And Spelling Dystopia is a work we did 2009 in Japan. And in Japan we found an island which is deserted or abandoned, and it's called Gunkanjima. It's near Nagasaki. And on this island, it was a coal mining island, and until 1974, almost 5,000 people lived there and were coal mining. But then the coal mine was closed because the resources were exploited, and everybody had to leave the island. And since then, it's abandoned. Yeah, I will talk about it later. Well, okay, I can do it now. Yeah, this island, at the moment, nothing is going on. It's totally empty. Nobody can really visit it. But there's a group of citizens from Nagasaki who takes care about it, and they want to have it later on as a kind of world heritage. But it's difficult. Also, the government is not really supporting this question because it has also dark history. So, and I mean, there's not only the coal mining, the industry, but there's also, like in the war times, it was also a war camp for prisoners from China and Korea who used to work in the coal mine as well. And also dangerous place. So it's quite difficult for them to find a support to get it World Heritage, because then also they would have to talk about all the other issues. And what's interesting about this island, this is how it looks on the island. So there's all lots of wood in the streets. It's all it all broke down by the typhoon who happened to be there every autumn on this island. And this is inside the school, so the buildings are still there, and there's still a part of the stuff from 1974. And in that time we were also teaching at the university in Sapporo in Hokkaido, and we asked our students about this island, if they know about the coal mining, if they know about the history of this island. And we found out that nobody really, or almost nobody, know about the history, but everybody remembered that it was the location of the movie Battle Royale. So everybody remembered it as a ghost island, as a location of this movie, and nobody really remembered the real history. And so for us, this was very interesting, this kind of shift of collective memory. And we thought that that would be the subject we're doing a film about, so the shift of collective memory in history. Because it was kind of overlaid by many different media, like mangas, video games about this island, and also this movie. And also recently there was the James Bond movie was also partly shot on the movie, on the island, but it was later. Skyfall. Yeah, we did a research. We went to the university in Nagasaki to find out a little bit more about that island, and also collected mangas and all these stories our students were talking about, where we could find the island. And then we went there. And one photo that we found that we really liked a lot was this photo from 1974, black and white photo of the school children from Gunkanjima who did this choreography on the sports ground of their school on the island, and it says "Sayonara Hashima," goodbye Hashima. So it was the last day, and this photo would be in the newspaper on the next day. And so we thought this is a very special way to express express the history of the island. We did another workshop with the high school students in Sapporo about Gunkanjima and the history, and how to find a new way to visualize the history of the island. And together with them, we developed a whole choreography, which is part of the movie later on, to explain the history of the island in 6 keywords. And the first of it is tanko, which means coal mine. So it's always in... this is solid rock. Sorry, I started with the second. The first is solid rock, because first the island was a solid rock. It's a kanji. And then the next ones are katakana. And this is tanko, which means coal mine. Then they were changing to Midori Nakishima, which means the island without green, because it was a total concrete island. Then the next is Jinko Kamitsu. It means it's totally overpopulated, too many people on too few place. And the next one is Shigen Sakusho, which means exploited resources. So in the end, all the coal was exploited and people had to leave. And Sayonara Hashima, so they said goodbye. And yeah, it's the last photo because I won't show an excerpt, but the movie has like 3 different storylines. One is this choreography of the school children. One is a walk over the island, from the point of view of someone who lived there before. And then the third one is circling around the island with a boat. And this is around 18 minutes, and it defines the length of the movie. And on the sound, on the sound layer, you have 2 different voiceovers. One is the voice of a girl who recalls fragments from this movie Battle Royale, and the other one is the voice of a man who lived there on that island and went to school there. So both tell a different story which took place on the exactly same island, on same places also, like in the school. And so if you watch the movie and listen to it from 2 stories, there will be a new one, a third one. Okay. Then I give the microphone to Maroan, and he will explain about 2 other projects.
Yeah, I hurry up. Okay, the next work we did 1 year later, no, 2 years later in 2010. It's called Narita Field Trip. It's a film 30 minutes long. And it's a mix of documentary and fiction. And we discovered very early, like the first time we went to Japan in '95, we were landing in Narita International Airport. It's about 1 hour away from Tokyo, but it's the Tokyo airport. There's also another one, Haneda, but Haneda is the city airport. And when we landed in Narita, we were flying above farms. So there are farms in between the runways, and this is also another blind spot or hidden story of Japanese history, because you can't find it in school books. So we also talk with our students about it, and again they had no idea about the history and also the conflict which was involved during the construction of the airport. So the Japanese government decided in '66 to build a new airport, because there was also the war in Korea and then the upcoming war in Vietnam, and they needed a new airport to start their planes, like the army planes from Japan to go to Vietnam and to Korea. And but this was not so easy, because there was like a lot of farms and a lot of agriculture, and also these people who they lived before in China, and after Japan had to like this one part how was it called? Yeah, Manchuria. So they were settled after Second World War to this area. So it was not too easy to tell them again that they had to leave this place. And the protests were the most bloody protests in Japan after Second World War. So many policemen died, and also protesters and farmers. And it was also the meeting point of the countercultural movement in Japan. So also like communists and very different groups of protesters were joining into this protest. So it became a national symbol of counterculture. Yeah, and all these people are still there. Like many farmers had to sell their land, but some could remain. And yeah, they are still doing farming in between the runways, and they can reach their farms with tunnels. So there are many tunnels which are leading to these farms. And our idea was to not just to make a documentary about it, because there are many documentaries from that time, really good ones, and we wanted to make a film about the current situation. But not from our point of view, but from the point of view of 2 students, like two of our students. And so we had the idea to bring them there, and then to get in touch with the farmers and to learn about the history. And this was these were like improvised scenes. So we went there before alone, and then we found like some locations we wanted to film, and also we talked with the people beforehand, with the farmers, and then we shot improvised scenes between the students and the farmers. So in the end it looks like a fiction film. And another interesting thing is that they are doing organic farming, and these products are very famous in Japan in organic food stores, because people don't buy it because it's from a farm near an airport, but they want to support the protest. So these products are quite successful because they are supporting the protest against also the extension of the airport. Yeah, here you can see some images from the shooting, like making of images. And also there's like every year a big demonstration on the airport. And we also timed it that we were able to shoot also this demonstration. But the interesting thing is, or it was, that it's very difficult to enter this area because usually there are like checkpoints, and so in the end only like these people who really have farms are allowed to protest against the airport. And these people, as you can imagine, they are already quite old, so between like 75 and 85. So it doesn't look like a normal demonstration where you can usually find like younger people. Yeah, and in the end there were more policemen, like maybe 5 times more policemen than protesters, as you can see on some images.
Just imagine.
Yeah, and then there are a lot of fences because some streets are owned. They are owned by the farmers, and they are surrounded by fences. So it's like a labyrinth or a maze. And then a last image, you can see there's a shrine and like the runway. So some parts they never. Like the shrine, it's like a holy place, and the Japanese government didn't dare to buy this shrine or to even think about to get rid of it. So this is like very special, like from our point of view. And then there's a bird's view, and you can see like the green fields, and these are the farms. So in between the runways, there are 2 runways, and so maybe like 25% of the airport is still farmland. Yeah, then another work we did last year, our last work, and we just showed it at Berlinale, at Forum Expanded. It's a 3-channel video installation. It's called Spirits Closing Their Eyes, and we realized it in 2011 and 2012 during a residency in Kyoto at Goethe Institute, the German Cultural Institute. And as I said, it's a 3-channel video installation, and we were interested in the and the changes after March 11, after the disaster in Fukushima, but more in the invisible changes, because radiation is invisible. And as we arrived in Japan in September 2011, also everything seemed very normal, like before, like we went there in 2010 or the years before. So also the people didn't really change, like from the surface. So you couldn't really tell if something happened, like something terrible happened or not. So we decided aesthetically to do a movie where we have 3 different image categories, like portraits, landscapes, and statements. And not like a dialogue interview, but we had 6 questions. And then like our friends or people we interviewed, they were allowed to answer as long as they want. So in the end, we took also like very long statements into this film, but it's not like a non-linear. It's not like a linear film. It's non-linear, and it consists of 180 clips, and they are programmed and by an algorithm. And there are like 18 keywords, and they are embedded in the clips. So it's a quite complex structure. And yeah, people are, it's like the 180 clips are 7 hours long. So you can just enter the installation, then you can watch it like for 30 minutes or 1 hour. And it's similar if you decide to go to Japan for 1 week or 3 months or 2 years. So it depends really how long you are staying in the installation to get an image of the situation. Yeah, then I show quickly like 10 images from our movie. So here you can see friends of us. They live in Tokyo. They just got a baby on March 2011. And they decided not to move away from Tokyo because of radiation, but they stayed and they bought a Geiger counter. So they are checking now every day when they are going to the playground if it's okay that the baby can play there or not. Then another big issue is, of course, food. And there are still products in the supermarkets from Fukushima, like this vegetable. It says also it's from Fukushima, and these things are cheaper than things from other regions. Then fish, you never know where the fish was swimming, in which area. So you can also not really trust the labels. Oh, this is the wrong. Yeah. Then there was a big campaign for from the Japanese railways to go to Tohoku area because this was a very popular area for tourists and agriculture. So they promoted it in December 2011 that people should go there again because the numbers of tourists dropped dramatically, as you can imagine. Another campaign from the government was saving electricity, but this was also stopped in December 2012 before Christmas and 11. And there were like Christmas illuminations, and we also talked with our friends in Japan, and they said, the government really had to decide to stop this campaign because people were starting to get depressed without the traditional Christmas illuminations. Then we found also people who were collecting signatures for a referendum to stop nuclear power. And they, like for Tokyo, they needed around 200,000 signatures, and they just got it in 3 months. And then another big group of people we met were mothers from Fukushima who left on their own with their children to Kyoto, because the city of Kyoto provided apartments to people from Fukushima for free for 2 years. So on March 31st, many mothers will go back to Fukushima because then they cannot afford it to live there anymore. And also then these houses will be crashed down because these houses were social housing, was a social housing area from the 50s. And they were already planned to be crashed down before Fukushima happened. Yeah, then we went also to the coast near Kyoto, 60 kilometers from Kyoto, at the Chinese Sea. And this is called, in Japan, the Nuclear Ginza. So Ginza is the biggest shopping street in Tokyo. And Nuclear Ginza means that this is the stretch where you can find the most of the Japanese power plants, like 14, in a range of 100 kilometers. Yeah, then we met also scientists. Like this guy, he invented a new Geiger counter for $30. And it's made by recycled PET bottles. And it cannot show data, but it can show like different colors, like red, orange, yellow. So it will be the next big gadget for the Japanese kids. They can attach it to their mobile phone. And another, we often found like PET bottle stories. This is another PET bottle story. And this is in an elementary school in Koriyama, very near to the power plant in Fukushima. And parents were so desperate that they built a wall of PET bottles filled by water or filled with water to lower the radiation inside the classrooms, and it also worked in a very low way. Yeah, and this is the last image. So we did also an intervention with art students from Kyoto, and we built like a symbolic wall of PET bottles in front of a nuclear power plant near Kyoto. That's it.
That is a really haunting image because it suggests both hope and resilience and also, in some sense, the great inadequacy of anything you might do in the face of catastrophe. But thank you, all four of you. I keep saying both for some reason, but for putting forward both sides, yes. Putting forward both experiences and inquiries and propositions. Somehow the notion of the field trip or the expedition reminds one of the specter of artist as ethnographer, the notion that one can embrace alterity, seek to represent it, and then be sometimes not fully attentive to what that kind of connection involves. But I find here that in both sets of projects and practices, there's a quite different way of extending oneself in ethical terms, if you will. And there's almost, in some sense, a divinatory approach to when you reach out to another site, another society. So I'm beginning to think that it's not really frameable in a rhetoric of site specificity at all, the work that you've done. It's much more a site-responsive set of practices. And also, it works at different orders. I mean, on the one hand, there's a probe or an activation of histories that have been covered up with silence or which have been elided in some way. There's also a seeking of blind zones or reserves that are secreted in architecture or in site. And then there's, at another level of intensity, an actual insertion of oneself into a community with the aim, it would seem, of bringing to light certain questions that have been foreclosed, exploring the possibilities of justice, and seeking to represent what has been denied representation. So it's a series of different relationships expressed at the level of looking for solidarity, establishing justice, or just bringing to light and bearing witness to lost histories. So I have a set of questions which I'll begin with, and I'll turn first to you, Juan and Dolores. When you act in this way as somehow not an observer but a participant, in a sense it's blurring some of those dichotomies that inhabit such a situation. Are you observer? Are you participant? Are you partisan? How has that worked with you in your projects? And I'm thinking particularly of the Malmo project that you showed, Semantic Gap. How has that worked in terms of making available a certain kind of public resource, if you will, to a community that had allowed it to lapse from view?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can define any role, any specific role. I think you go by crossing and changing roles as much as you can. And maybe this is an influence from fictional thinking or fictional strong reference into own experience. So, and somehow I think it's that you play different subjectivities. So, and it's a way to collect information and to push people to give information to you. So, like in the Semantic Gap, for sure, it's not that I went to list the dog, you know. So, in a walk, I found the fountain. When we got there, I got interested in this architect. I just tried to collect on him. They mentioned this. He was a very active architect in this region, and far to Stockholm even, but more south. And when I get to know that he built this fountain and the fountain was useless, and the position of the fountain was very interesting because it was in between two buildings of himself. One was the technological, and the other I don't remember, but I think was mathematics, and that pond was in the middle. So, and I was pretty interested in the failure for sure. That what attracted me much than anything else.
Because sometimes I mean, it is now customary to, and that is how it is. Art projects, of course, produce a certain form of knowledge. One produces new knowledge through these projects. But I've often been haunted by the notion of what happens to this new knowledge that might be produced, however, partially or provisionally out of a project. What is the afterlife of that knowledge? Does it somehow form part of a kind of self-awareness for this locale where you've intervened, in some sense? How does that
Yeah, but
work?
also it can be independent from the locality where it was produced. And I think that maybe it's also related to affection, no? That when we start, we receive an invitation, we need for ourselves to create a map or a sense of place, no? That in a way then, from my point of view, it's not so much as giving information to someone about something, but more of giving a lecture of the space that is playing with this new reference, but that doesn't erase the history or the characteristics of the place where it is shown. No? So.
Yeah, I think that also is something that is that probably is given that we share, you know, like it's not a trust, but it's something given, which probably is untrust as well. I think it includes both attitudes. I mean, negative and positive somehow. And I don't know. It's in the case of Sweden, we as Latin America, and Sweden was a country that holds quite many exiled people during the 60s and the 70s. So this kind of makes a link, a previous link, you know. And I think that anyway you are getting rid of the idea of specificity or site specificity and going to Smithson and what happens in New York later on him. And somehow I think that rules still on the invitation when you get invited to with a budget, with the time to spend on the place, to research and to do this sort of purely physiognomic encounter or so. Though, and somehow I don't know, it's something that probably we share all here in this room, I think, and it's the sort of the expansion of the whites all over the planet, you know. Somehow, when I got to Sweden, I get to understand this sort of idea, you know, is me as a Latin American descendant from, and with the history of very bad says somehow, you know, very bad narrated so far. And I don't know what I'm trying to guess. This moment right now is coming to me. You know, that this is something that we basically share, and that's probably is from that we can build these understandings, you know?
I'm going to carry those thoughts through to Nina and Maroan, because and I've been fascinated by these interventions you've made in a Japanese context, which many of us who've worked there know is not at all easy in terms of investigating historical questions, notions of justice. But the work you've done there is clearly premised on the notion of restoring representation to that which has gone below the radar, which in turn seems very, very clearly linked to a notion of justice. So do you want to talk a little bit about how your projects, both with the Narita community and the more recent engagement with Fukushima, might feed into this kind of project that is oriented towards a conception of restoring justice?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about if you are interested in the subject of justice,
Okay.
But we were maybe more interested that it was a blind spot, so people were not talking about it. Even like with like artist friends or curators, we talked about it. Then they responded, "Oh no, this it's not a subject because it's such, yeah, especially Narita.
Yeah.
They said it's a long time ago and it's over, and we said no, it's not over. There are still like farmers, they are protesting. So in a way, they didn't want to talk about it, and also like that you cannot find it in school books. It also shows that it's a taboo, and there are many taboos. And we were interested why these subjects are taboos, why people don't talk about it. So we were not interested to justify the farmers that they are still there. So we were not interested in also to that there's a justice for them. So more that why people are not talking about it. This was our interest, because when we lived there were like many open secrets.
Yeah.
Which were like blind spots, and people ignored it, or they felt uncomfortable to talk about it.
And not only that, but it also changed. So after Fukushima, it changed, because we've done these two works before, Spelling Dystopia and also Narita field trip, and somehow it was difficult to find a place or institution or someone who wanted to show it. We had some lectures, but not really an exhibition, and also because it's a difficult subject, especially Narita. But then after Fukushima, suddenly the interest changed, and people in Japan also got more interested in this social or politic issues. And it got somehow more on the radar, so people were interested on it. And then finally, also last December, we had an exhibition at the Photo Museum in Ebisu in Tokyo, and it was about pop and avant-garde, starting from the 60s and 70s, where there was a really big connection between art and politics in that time, still in Japan. It was also the time of the protest. But then later in the 80s and 90s, it got totally lost, or not totally maybe, but it shifted more to other subjects like pop culture. And just now, after the catastrophe in Fukushima, again, it starts that artists also are more interested in the subjects, and also the public. And so they had this exhibition at the Photo Museum, which combined works from artists from Japan, 60s and 70s, and then they invited also our movies, like all these three movies that we just showed in this presentation, and showed it together. And so this was somehow also very special, and it was a very young curator who did this show, and there was not much press about it, because still it's not such an easy issue to talk about. So this was an interesting experience in this subject.
But the minute you explore historical silences, or in your case in the Avian project as well, in some sense retracing what has been occluded or eclipsed, you're already part of the way towards considering the representation of what has been erased. And therefore, I'm not saying you're a crusader for justice, but I'm just saying that a horizon of justice is contoured by your very gesture. And in recent months, for all kinds of reasons, I've been thinking and rereading Hal Foster's essay, which everybody here knows, Artist as Ethnographer. And I've been thinking of this question of how alterity, the other, can either be, as Foster points out, of course, in his essay, either it is turned in some way into a research object, held at a certain distance, or it is, or one identifies so completely with it that one loses one's sense of self in a certain way. And I think that also can happen. Both seem to me, and in the Foster text, those are marked out as two equally, in some sense, as two occupational hazards. How does one achieve what Foster in that essay calls a parallactic practice, a framing in which the framer is framed as well, and you have a certain share of responsibility towards these enigmatic situations that you've discovered that you're responding to. And I think in your work, it seems to take the form of a certain kind of translation. I like particularly the retracing of a certain kind of manual activity in the way in which you revisited the early architectural drawings, read onto them, the notion of mapping what seems to be an empty space, but of course which marks the erasure of the communities that lived there. So do you want to talk a little about this translation into practice, which also takes the form of recovering practices that have fallen out of sight?
I think that maybe it's marginal to these points, but that our work is a studio-based work. So that means that materials and being in front of the work for us are crucial. No? So also this idea of seeing the work neutralized by the screen and the computer already make me, for me, like even more distance, not the time distance, but the material distance. But I think that also when we start working in the case of Irvine and start doing that drawing, hand drawing, it's a way to try to understand what this structure was about. Like, please tell me the secrets, no? Because also then the research is interesting, because then when you go to the facts and historic facts, I think that most of the time they are not so much included in the exhibition, because what we want is just, or we hope, that the viewers can also get their curiosity, and because also these materials are accessible, are there to be read, no? But and also it's a lot of, I would say, spontaneity, because in that case that we were at the same time reading this book of Saer, it's not that we start rational thinking, okay, what can we read? But I think that is always your one experience, no? Like connecting your background with what is coming, and that for that reason, because what is coming is connected to what you already are, you can read it and you have an interest on it, right?
Yeah. Of course, there is another number of things on that drawing, which is which is again is more information, which I don't know. Sometimes is quite boring, I think, to follow it. But somehow this location, Irvine, is a city I was built in the 1960s in U.S. It was so important, and in terms of investment, was so important that even Johnson was there, Lyndon Johnson was there just to make a speech in front of, it's like the first big project after the end of the war of building a new city in the US. And this is business that is purely capitalist, hyper-capitalism result, right? This is a big, huge ranch that belongs to a family whose name was Irvine, and they just sold the land to the state for $1, but they kept the rights to deal forever with the real estate business of the entire land. So they built, as a center of this new environment, urbanistic environment, they built a university with a library in the center, right? Like a middle-age gesture, right?
With no name. The library didn't have a name.
With no name, yeah. The name got it,
so
yes,
like
4 years ago because of someone who did
Langston,
a donation, right? So, in these ways that we get focused in this library, and was this sort of, again, silly gesture of just tracing a line on it. That was not just addressing the landscape, also was more ambiguous than the landscape.
But also I think that maybe it goes counter theorizing, but the interesting first was morphological, was trying to discover why the morphology of the library was appealing to us. From the library, getting to know the city that, if you compare with Brasilia and with Le Corbusier, is quite successful in terms of the population. So it's not that you are criticizing, because Pereira is very interesting when you talk. It's very much about what's happening before Nixon, no, in Johnson, because at first he has like a speech that is totally that you agree with, and in terms of integrations of minorities and how he worked that with urbanization and the university open, not closed as a fortress. So, but I think that most of our research starts with the form, with appealing to a form that has something that we need to decipher. No?
Yeah, I like these notions of deciphering, of addressing the palimpsest. And that also leads me to think in your work, for instance, of how if you're consulting an archive, you're also, in some sense, putting out an archive now. This, the algorithmic work, for instance, it's a set of narratives. It is testimony, and it's survivor testimony even at some level. And this came up also last evening in the conversation with Rasha Salti, that there's a considerable body of what does one call them? We can't even name them, because they could be the subject of various different kinds of rubrics. They could be evidence, they could be the documents for a future justice, they could also be artworks, but they could also be a provocation to all of us to see ourselves as other than simply recipients or consumers of art, whatever this might be. And that's what I'm inviting you to consider under the rubric of justice.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it can also have like different functions, not like just like a video installation or like an art piece, but as you mentioned, can be also used like as a testimony or like a proof.
Without in any way wearing down or erasing the complexity of what you've achieved as a work. In that sense, it's not just simply material put out. So. Yeah, so with these thoughts, maybe this is the right time to open up the floor to questions. Do you have questions at the back? Do you have a mic that can travel?
So we've been discussing these sort of dichotomies between a space that is empty and a space that is filled, inhabited or not. I wonder if we could go back to this idea of Derrida's aporia of hospitality, that he mentions that the aporia of hospitality is divided between this need for mastery of space and of the guest and welcoming, so letting go of space and allowing the guest in. So what we can deduce is that in a way the host does not necessarily belong or inhabit the space. The host owns the space, controls the space. And this idea of the active guest, what I saw in both groups is this, that while one group shows how we can retrace or give relevance to ignored dimensions of place, and another group shows how we can reclaim these spaces, I sort of see this attempt at sort of claiming a certain mastery of the space through, in a way, belonging, a sort of competing kind of hospitality through belonging. And my question is then, how does the active guest differentiate himself from a host? How does the active guest avoid becoming a host? Or does he want to avoid this?
I don't consider myself not a guest, not a host. I think what we were talking about is temporary citizenship, no? But at the same time, I think it's more like connecting, connecting places and connecting sites and connected instances, more than this binary between guest or host.
Okay.
Yeah, I also agree that we are temporary citizens, or have a temporary citizenship when we stay in a different place, but it also depends very much how long we are staying in a place, because as you also maybe experienced when you go to another place, that you are very curious and want to get to know everything about the city or about a place immediately. Like I have always this desire that I want to talk with people about life, about the situation of life when I go first time to a different place. So I'm always very curious, and I never use like a travel book, so I really want to talk with people, and then of course I also get involved with the problems in this place. And I think it's not possible in 1 week to understand a place and also to get this temporary citizenship. It needs more time. And this is only possible if you really move to a place, or if you spend like 6 months or a year with an artist in residence, for example, or if you really decide to move to another city or another place for a year or longer.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because your question was how to avoid to be a host, right? So it's if you're a guest, right? So that's yes. So that's also maybe a little bit different, because we are there and we live there for a while. We have the experience, for example, in the residence, and then when we start doing a project and inviting people from the place, then we are also getting in this position of a host, right? And this is an interesting point, of course, then. So how to work together. And then we have already the knowledge that we already collected, and then in that certain moment we share with the others, and then in the end, for us it's always important that in the end when we do something, that's why we do these workshops, that we do it with somehow together with the people at the place. So it's not so much what we think about it and then we do something about them, but we want to do something together. But of course it's always our, involved our point of view. From where we come from or how we are brought up. So I think there's a lot of the own language still in it, and it depends also how long you've been living in another place before. It's an important point. It's true.
Alice? But I do want to thank you for that productive question, because it's also thrown into relief a number of the choices and decisions and shifting perspectives that go into these practices. So you have a question? Is there a mic that can... Oh, wait a minute. Did you have the mic first, Hans?
What is this now?
Maybe a very short comment also. I don't think that there's something possible like temporarily a citizen. Because if you go with your passport to the border control and you're leaving your country and you improve your citizen by this document, and you go with this document and you cross again the control point and you go into another country, you don't change your citizen. It's not that you temporarily become a part of the body of what is the state, which is the state you are in as a guest, as an active guest. You have a very specific status quo in regard to the law, which recognizes you as a citizen of Germany or as a citizen of what else, I don't know. So I think this is at least very difficult to describe that from this point, but maybe if you activate, and this would be a question, this difference which is given by the facts that you are born in a nation, which construct you as a citizen, and especially as an active guest then in a situation, what can that lead to? Then you have a very abstract level. You are not have to subjectivize what you have. You coming as a body of a law into a body of another law, which maybe is a construction of a nation or something. So you thinking about this kind of abstract notion of being an active guest in this context?
Can I answer to this? I think that for me, the border is a place of transformation. I transform myself in the border, and actually, technically speaking, for example, in Argentina I was having my Argentine passport. In the state I got the green card, and here I have the Italian passport. But that doesn't, I don't think that is related to passport, but it's more related that I own myself this experience of transforming myself in the border, no? And being able to reinvent myself in the border, and maybe that's why, because that's maybe the history of my country, no? With all the immigrants that were having this possibility of reinventing, no? Themselves. But also in terms of being a guest or a temporary guest for a concrete and technical and methodological and strategical point of view of the realization of our work, sometimes we are not even in that place. For example, in the case of UCI, of Irving, we did not fly there. We just went there to install the show. And we were working with this idea, you know, that is near Los Angeles, near Hollywood, and this idea of like I said many times, superficially researching. And I think that the work, if we would have been there, it would have been different. Because being away, we were able to decontextualize the library and seeing the images that when you are there, when we experienced there, it was, I don't want the word contaminated, but let's say that by the real experience of being there, no? Sorry.
Just short comment. I think you're right. We are not citizen if we go there. I mean, we feel like maybe we want to feel like a global citizen who's changing places, but somehow we are more alien, because if we live in Japan, for example, we get alien registration, and somehow it feels sometimes also more like alien, because we are really a stranger to the other place, right? As long as we're not live there for a long time or become a real citizen. Right?
But I think this is just one sentence to Nina's statement about feeling alien. But I mean, this is the official term from the Japanese bureaucrats. Yes, so you get this stamp. We had also like a green card, but then we had this like special passport. It said we are registered aliens. But in a way, I didn't feel like an alien, but because we lived there for 3 years and we worked there, we paid our taxes, and we got involved in issues. And I mean, this is just like the official bureaucratic term for people like us when we lived there for 3 years and worked there. But I had not the feeling that I'm an alien, and that I'm not allowed to take part in social life and in activities.
Okay, Alice, you go first, and then afterwards, and Juan. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say that I sort of disagree on this idea of temporary citizenship not being or being, and maybe this is related with years of migration, constant migration, basically 19th century and half of 20th century in Latin America. It's particularly Argentina, because big ports and receiving people, basically anarchist from all over the planet, might say, almost like a congress. And that kept the thing on a sort of dispute, constant dispute, right, on every level. And I don't know, I think that maybe, I don't know if this is going to be so clear, but I think that somehow this thing we share, this, again, it's just we are all citizens of the expansion of capitalism, you know? And in that kind of sort of credential or whatsoever is that we move on and we interact, basically, in this sort of project, you know? When you get invited from any place, any country, to freely access to their own history and their own infrastructure and their own budget and produce and try to shape up an idea that maybe does not have any sense, which for me essentially matters, not the possibility to build something that have finally not any sense, right?
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps I can follow with that, because I'm really interested in, well, how is a guest active? And I can't help but think, of course, when we're speaking to your projects and to your work abroad or overseas or in places that is not your homeland, it's not the same as thinking of guest workers or migrant workers, right? I think what's at stake here is that difference between being a voluntary traveler or a forced one, right? And so the alien status and the refugee statuses are quite different. And I one of the things that makes me think also is how your project makes me think of not the tourist as the active guest, the sort of the tourist who tries to be aware and engaged with encountering a a new population or perhaps space. But there's also the other darker identity, if you will, of the temporary resident, is that you can, it made me think of foreign aid, you know, when you're going into a country, and sort of the discourses of developmentalism, and how this is a humanitarian gesture in a way, and this is related to what Ranjit was speaking to in terms of justice. And so a question I had was, through any of the projects, and it's really mainly for Maroan and Nina, for your projects, does it have that afterlife where it is being used to help them demand for representation and their rights to stay, or to help them get those 200,000 signatures in 3 months? Thank you.
You'll hold on to that thought, right? Because we're kind of at the end of our time, so we'll just gather the questions. You had a question at the back, right?
Thank you very much. My question is, I guess, following on a lot from the first question from Nina. Hello. And following on from this question at the front and the comments about justice. Precisely, it seems that the question that I'm kind of concerned with, and it's a challenge actually, that these presentations have brought up for me, is that this is the question for art. And it's a question that seems to come about when we understand the host country, for example, Japan, Fukushima, as being hospitable to art, to artists coming there. But then what happens with this legislative space that then art seems to subvert by changing that space precisely into a legislative space for art, where artists are permitted precisely to be the ones that deem some group of people unable to speak for themselves, and then capable itself of giving justice to those people. So this is my concern. I think it's a concern that is brought up by your presentations. I don't know your work well enough to know whether it kind of sidesteps or complicates those kinds of concerns. But
yeah, maybe we were more selfish when we started the project, because our intention was not like to work as a aid worker, because yeah, we had when we went there like first time in '95, then we went almost every year to Japan for exhibitions, and then we were invited to teach there for 3 years, from 2007 to 2010, and then we applied for a residency in 2011, and we applied with a different project. So we didn't want to do something about Fukushima, because when we applied 2010, it didn't happen at that time. And then, yeah, we changed our project, and then we were very selfish because we were interested. Did Japan change? Because when we arrived there, then it seems that it not changed, like from the opinion of the people and from the lifestyle. And we had not any intention to, to help people with their activities like activists. So to help them to collect signatures, but we just wanted to observe the situation. So this was like an artistic project. It was not no. I mean, we didn't work in any function as like protesters. It was not a protest work.
No, but I don't know. Somehow I'm a little bit surprised about the selfishness.
I mean, we sympathize. Yeah, I mean, we sympathized with the people who were worried about the situation, of course, because we were also worried. But we were not working for human rights organization. So we, no, I mean, it's a difference.
It's a difference, but still with the artwork, somehow that's also why we do it, because we want to somehow support the communication or the dialogue, because there were so many subjects nobody really wanted to talk about between each other, also this after Fukushima. And so somehow with the project and the interviews, people started to talk about, and also later when we showed it, when finally there was this exhibition in Tokyo, and also we showed it in Sapporo in different places, finally the subjects came on and people were also talking about it. And my hope is, of course, that we can show it more often and that it will also trigger some dialogue, because that's all the subjects that was a kind of blind spots or people didn't talk about.
No, but I don't agree, because people were already talking about it, even without our work. So I think it's not an activist work. It's for us it was like to find a visual language for images which can't show. Which things which you can't show, like the invisible changes. This was our aim, to show the invisible changes with images. So it was not about helping people to understand the situation or to trigger a dialogue, because this is political activist work, and I don't identify with this work, this intention.
But it has different
and maybe we have different opinions about realizing this work. This happens with group work.
Gosh, you were supposed to have a unified view. But not at all. I mean, I think this, in some sense, actually opens up, discloses, and makes manifest some of the ideas we were discussing yesterday about the nature of an assembly.
It's free of interpretation, which we just agreed.
We have a fight here.
No, but I'm very glad that we've continue this later, Nina. That we've been able to open up in the mode of argument rather than resolution and certainty many of these questions of the relationship between host, guest, transculturality, questions of possible solidarities and future horizons of justice. And thank you very much, all of you, for having participated in this conversation, and to all of you who expanded and took it forward and engaged with it. The questions and these inquiries will continue in the next session, which is Homi Bhabha's lecture upstairs in the auditorium at 6 o'clock. So I do hope that you will stay with us and join us in about half an hour upstairs. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.